we're going to do a little bit of a review of what we did last time by way of catching up on that High Holy Day prayer playbill. That's where we're going to start. And then we're going to go right into that Mahzor, go right into the Torah service and into Rosh Hashanah Musaf. We'll see how far we get. It is a beast of a Musaf, so that's what we're going to dig into this week. I think we can get through all of Musaf today. I do. I think we can get all the way through it. But there is some structural stuff for us to explore together. So let's take a look at that prayer playbill first.
I thought we're doing Torah service tonight, and then you're going to get through Torah and Musaf tonight?
Torah and Musaf tonight. We can do both. Yeah, we're going to get through both. Torah service is pretty basic. Yeah. Shofar's in there too, but it's briefer than you think. It's like small but mighty. So we'll get there. So we are going to start with the prayer playbill for the morning. We are not going to go back and review Pesukei to Zimra today. We're just going to take a look back at Shacharit for a few minutes. So, starting last week, we had an opportunity to look at where we began in Shacharit, which we began in earnest at Hamelech. I asked us to review beginning last week that the reason that we named the break there is that that is where our new service leader, our new Chazan or Shaliach or Shlichat Zibor begins there on page 69. That page number has been corrected now. Okay? Then we rise and we go to Yishtabach and follow our way all the way through the normative structure of Shacharit, and as I keep reminding you, also the normative structure of every Mariv, which is a call to worship known as the Baruch Hu, followed by a structure of two blessings, one about light and one about love, the Shema, another blessing about redemption, and then the Amidah. So that's the structure that we go through. So the first blessing ends in Or Chadash, the second in Ahava Rabbah, right? That ends in Ohev Amo Yisrael, and the last one ending in Ga'al Yisrael, preceded by Micha Mocha, right? Micha Mocha leading into Tzor Yisrael, leading into Ga'al Yisrael. We looked at all of that last week, and we got into the Shacharit Amidah. One of the reasons that I want us to look so carefully right now as we look at the structure of the Shacharit Amidah is to remember that just as I asked you to pay attention to how the structure of the Shacharit Amidah mimics every other Amidah that you've ever seen ever, so too will the Musaf Amidah mimic that structure. It's just going to have a whole, it's like the difference between a deli sandwich that you get in Los Angeles and a deli sandwich you get in like Brooklyn. You know what I mean? It's like, it's a thick Amidah. We're going bananas with the Amidah, okay? Amidah on, it's interesting. Like it's maybe you would anticipate an even thicker Amidah on Yom Kippur because it's such a crazy day of prayer. The way we get to lengthier prayer on Yom Kippur is not by having a lengthier Amidah, but instead, does anyone know what makes prayer so long on Yom Kippur? Why is there so much more prayer?
Extra services. Exactly.
Thank you. Exactly. There's an entire additional service. Ne'ilah has an entire additional Amidah. Right, so the Amidah itself and the services themselves are not so long. They're made a little bit longer by the Selichot, by the additional supplications that are added, but those supplications do not amount to as much content as are altogether in the Musaf for Rosh Hashanah. Okay, so I want us to pay attention to what we did last week in anticipation of what the Amidah structure is going to be this coming week. Remember, I never know, my analogies are very mixed, like the bread, the like Oreo part of the cookie, I don't know, we'll go with sandwich for right now, but like the bread of the sandwich, the beginning and the close, right? Let's not mix up and say Pedicha and Chatima, which we got into last week. The beginning and the close of the Amidah are always going to be the same, right? The approach and the landing are always going to be the same structure. We are always going to butter God up and end with gratitude. So we're always going to get that avot, gevurot, kedusha situation. And we're always going to end with a ritzei, modim, sim shalom, or shalom rav. Always. Okay? Where is that? Where's my ritzei? Right there. Ritzei really should have like a little blue situation. Let's make that blue. Let's honor ritzei in that way. There we go. Okay, so the structure is always going to be the same. It begins like this. And then the Shacharit Amidah, as we looked at last week, it has these extra bits in it that we recognize, and it's like, oh, we're there. It's Shacharit of Rosh Hashanah. It must be because we have Misodachamim Unevonim. All of a sudden, we're in a High Holy Days. We depart midway in a vote between Avot and Gevurot. We depart into this Misodachamim and Zochreinu or Zochreinu Lechaim. We depart midway through for these little bits and pieces of like miniature supplication poetry situation. Zochreinu Lechaim Mel Chafetz Chaim. Remember us for life, God who is desirous of life. Right? We're asking God. We'll ask him, but not too much, because we're still in Avot. We're still playing on our merit. Then Gevurot, a little Mechalkel Chaim, similar liturgy to typical liturgy, but little departure. And then a bunch of poetry specific to Rosh Hashanah, like why not stop and just smell the Rosh Hashanah roses for a while with a bunch of poetry. Then the Kedusha, always got to sanctify God like the angels, requiring a minyan. And then the Uvchein Tain paragraphs, as we got into last time. Remember, possibly the first historical addition along the lines of just random additions to the Siddur, right, to the Amidah, rather, specifically the Amidah.
Why is the Kedusha put off to this late? To me, it seems late in the Amidah. Why isn't it earlier and then have all the extra stuff after it?
You mean why so many piyutim pre-Kedusha?
Yeah.
I am guessing that it is a thematic choice. So I'm guessing that while we're still in the section in which we are, again, it's the buttering up God section, right? So in the Avot Imahot section, we are playing on Zechut. We are playing on merit of our ancestors. God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. Remember us, remember your brit, remember your covenantal relationship with them. We are the descendants of that relationship. And then Gevurot, God, you are mighty. Atagi borle olam Adonai mechayim etim ata. God, you're mighty. You're the one who's going to wake the dead. Remember all that stuff you promised? So while we're in that section, we're going to stop and poetically extra praise God on the themes of the day, which is, in the case of Rosh Hashanah, Malchut, right? The idea of God's kingship. My best guess is that's why so much extra there. And when we get to Musaf, all the extra stuff is going to be where you would expect it to be, which is not there. So when we get to Musaf, it gets moved later. I don't know why Shachari gets it front-loaded quite as much as it does. I will say when you get to this Mahzor, these are typically, we do one or this one or this one. We don't typically do all three. It would be a lot because Kedusha would get pushed off. Does that answer the question-ish? Begins to?
Yeah, that nobody knows. It's probably rabbinical, I guess.
It is definitely rabbinically ordained, definitely poetic. Like Tzarich Iyun, it's worth looking into. Okay, so and then Kedusha, though, we do actually put off for these Uvechein Tain paragraphs. We do actually put off the Chatimah. The Kedusha doesn't have its signature until here, right? We don't finish the Kedusha until here. And then we get these middle paragraphs, which are all about this whole section here, where it was all about the day, right? Specific to Rosh Hashanah day. And that comes instead of, if you were thinking about Shabbat, that's where all the Shabbat stuff would go. If you were thinking about a weekday, it was where what I was talking about last week is all the fun stuff of asking God for everything we need. On our everyday prayers, that's where we ask God for stuff. And instead, here we say, thank you, God. Thank you for this new year. Thank you for this new month. Thank you, Melech kol haaretz mekadesh Israel, right? Sovereign of the universe, sanctifier of Israel, right? And we talked about how Shabbat is going to ruin that super cool tune, right? Mekadesh Israel v'yom Shabbat. Okay, so we made that fun joke and we're done. And then we get back to the regular structure, as I said, of Ritzei, Modim Anachnu Lach, Shatahu Adonai Eloheinu, same content as usual, but with some stuff stuffed in there that sticks around for the full 10 days. That's all about being written into the book of life. Uchtov L'chaim, or B'Sefer Chaim. God who is the Oseh HaShalom, God who is the maker of the peace. And then Avinu Malkeinu, which is not recited on Shabbat, but our Father, our Sovereign. And that is as far as we got last week. Let's preview where we're going to get this week. You ready? You feeling ready to move on to, okay. All right, here we go. Okay, Torah service for Rosh Hashanah. The Torah service for Rosh Hashanah, we typically, traditionally, only take the Torah scrolls out in the presence of a minyan. We certainly only take a Torah scroll out if we're going to read from it. And we only take it out for the sake of reading. So if you're doing a Zoom-based service, you may not see a scroll taken out this year. We do Ein Kamocha and Vayehi B'Nsoah Ha'aron, and then it depends what happens from there. We're going to see that there's a difference between the Torah service that we do on Shabbat and the Torah service that we do when it's on not Shabbat. When it's on Shabbat, when Rosh Hashanah and Shabbat coincide, the Torah service is identical to the Torah service that we do on a Shabbat, right? It's actually a great trick because you can have a layperson or a bar mitzvah kid, you can have them lead the Torah service on Rosh Hashanah if it's Shabbat, because it's the same as any old Torah service. If it's not Shabbat, we do the special stuff that we do on any Yom Tov, which is to say these special verses about God's 13 attributes and Va'ani Tefilati. We'll get there and we'll take a look at them.
But the tunes, are they the same on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur as they are on Shabbat?
If you're talking about Ein Kamocha and Vayehi B'Nsoah Ha'aron and Be'an Arachetz, yes, there is no special Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur tune for those particular ones. Those are an exception to that rule that I was talking about last time, that like the more similar the piece, then the more different that it's made. Once you get to like a Torah service on Shabbat, there's an interesting thing that happens. I'm glad you're asking about this, Barbara. There's an interesting thing that happens when you get to a Torah service on Shabbat, on Rosh Hashanah in particular, Yom Tov in general, which is that all of a sudden, we sort of let ourselves slip into Shabbat mode a little bit. The same thing is going to happen when we get to the Aliyot. I will show you when we get there. We sort of let ourselves slip into being Shabbat a little bit. And I think we do that because if we didn't, we'd be missing Shabbat. Right? We would actually like skip over the experience of our Shabbat services in that way. So so we'll get there in just a minute about the Aliyot as well, and I'll show you what I mean. And stop me if I forget to mention it when we get to the Aliyot, please. And then the Torah is taken out of the Ark. We do Shema, Echad, and Gadlu, which we normally do on Shabbat anyway. And then the Torah will be processed around, except it won't be if you're in an in-person service on our campus this year because safety precautions. And then we have Torah readings. This is one of those things where they make us memorize in cantorial school. You know, on weekdays you have 3 aliyot. Which days have 4 aliyot? Rosh Chodesh and Hanukkah. And then which days have 5 aliyot? And if you like, it goes up and up and up. So you have Rosh Hashanah that has 5, and you have Yom Kippur that has 6, and Shabbat has 7. So we'll talk about that.
It's also 4 for Sukkot for Kol HaMoed, isn't it? And Pesach.
So whenever you're in Chol HaMoed, you were just doing 3
for Pesach and Hanukkah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we have a, and then we have, where did I leave off? If there is no, I made some notes here. If there's no minyan, there are no aliyot, at least in our community. We do not say those brachot from a distance, and we don't do it if the minyan is anchored in if we're not anchored in an in-person minyan. Okay? And then prayer for healing for the ill is said in there. We're going to get to that as well. Maftir aliyah, we lift and wrap the Torah, and we move to the haftarah. We'll talk about that in a minute. There's a different one on day 1 than there is on day 2. The shofar service is done while the Torah is out on the table. And then we'll talk about what that shofar service is made up of. And then we get to opening the ark again, saying one more verse, a processional if it's safe to do so, Eitz Chaim, the ark is closed, and we're done. Let's look at the Torah service in the Mahzor. Are there any questions before we go to the Mahzor itself?
No.
Okay, let's take a look at it. I'm going to put it up on the screen. You can open it up. Oops. You can open up to page 96 if you have Lev Shalom in front of you. So here's what I was talking about with Ein Kamocha and Vayehi B'Ntzil Ha'aron. Gosh, it looks a whole lot like Shabbat, right? And if it were, you wouldn't even be able to tell that it wasn't Shabbat if you walked into shul for this one page. Ein Kamocha of Harachamim. And then the ark is opened. Vayehi B'Ntzil Ha'aron. Just the normal stuff. And then we turn the page, and then it depends. If it's not Shabbat, like day 2 of Rosh Hashanah, then we get Adoshem, Adoshem El Rachum V'Chanun, or Adoshem, Adoshem El Rachum V'Chanun. Now those two tunes do not go together, really. But
can you enlarge that just a hair?
Sure.
Please, thank you.
Oh, that was not a hair. Hang on. Let me do this a different way.
Yeah, that's much better.
Great. Thanks for asking. And then we repeat these verses 3 times, okay? I'm going to preview for you. Is there anybody here on this call? I'm not going to put you on the spot, but anyone here who is considering coming to an on-campus service this year? Considering?
Nope.
Okay, there's at least one person who's considering. If you come to an on-campus field service this year, you would notice that it's unlikely that we would repeat these 3 times, right? Because it would save us time. Custom to do it 3 times. But we might say them quietly once. Right? These are the 13 attributes of God. You can find them, like fun fact, they're part of the fast day Torah reading. They are a direct biblical quote. They're one of the biblical quotes as part of our Mahzor. Then we read quietly this private meditation here, and we go down to Va'ani Tefilati, this little section here, these 2 lines that we again read and repeat 3 times. Va'ani Tefilati lecha adoshem meit ratzon, right? It is a tiny personal hineni. Later on, the Chazan, we're going to see, is going to do a huge personal supplication before God. May my words humbly be acceptable before you. This is a tiny one that we're doing constantly all the time. You can actually find this at the end of the Elohai Netzor in our Amidah as well. Va'ani tefilati lecha. And as for me, may my prayer be for you, Adonai, in an acceptable time, in a desirous hour. Elohim berov chastecha, God, in the abundance of your loving kindness. Haneni be'emet yishecha. It's just so, it's ripe with humility. It's a beautiful statement. Answer me truthfully with your saving that, with the quality of you that redeems me, that saves me. I like it. It's a tiny hineni. Just want to say, I think it gets overlooked. It's a very nice prayer. Anyway, if it's Shabbat, which is the first day, we just don't do this page. So, we actually do, we skip to the Brich Shemay quietly, and we go to Be'an Arachetz. Okay? Be'an Arachetz, and it's just like Shabbat. And then we do Shema Echad and Gadlu. They get repeated back and forth. There is a special melody on Rosh Hashanah that we use for this.
Well, when you have services at the campus or off campus on Zoom, we're not taking out a Torah, right?
Right.
So we won't have that.
But it's not prohibited to do these verses, so it's possible that people will do some pieces of this liturgy just sung without taking out a Torah scroll.
Okay.
Jeff?
When you say it's a mini Hineni, are you just saying thematically?
Thematically.
Okay. And remind me, the Hineni is so familiar, but where is it structurally?
Thank you for asking. The Hineni comes right before the repetition of the Amidah as we do it structurally. There are other choices other shuls make, but right before the repetition of the Amidah and Musaf. And it is the Chazan's prayer. Mm-hmm. We're going to see it, hopefully, a little later tonight. And it comes right before or after Chatzi Kaddish, depending on the shul you daven in and how they decide to do their davening. And then we get to Shema Echad and Gadlu that are repeated, and there's a special melody for them. Shema Yisrael, Ad Hashem Elokeinu, Ad Hashem Echad. And it's repeated, and back and forth, until Gadlu Ad Hashem Iti, Unero Mema Shemo Yachtov. And then you'd march around if you could march around. And sing L'chad Hashem Hagadula and your favorite melody. And then you get to the Gabaut. We're not going to go through the Gabaut in this class because this is not a class to teach you how to do that. But there is Gabaut that is the liturgy of the Torah service as well, right? It's the liturgy of the service, how to run it from the Torah table. You take aliyot, and again, there are usually 5 aliyot, but if it's Shabbat, there are
7.
Exactly. And Barbara, this is the part where I was going to come back to. There are 7 aliyot on Shabbat plus maftir. Taking the same exact amount of text. Let's take a look at this. If you look on page 100, you see how it says Rishon, which means first. Let's zoom in a little. It says Rishon, first, and Sheni, which means second. But then here it says Bishabat Shalishi, or you can look on the left side of the page. Oh, hang on, I gotta zoom out for that to work. 1 second. And page will resolve. It says in English on the left-hand side of the page, or like, that was rude for it to refresh like that. 1 second. What it means is that those aliyot basically take the same exact chapters and verses, the same exact psukim, and renumber them for Shabbat, right? It's not like we're reading extra stuff. They just get renumbered so that the structure of the day feels more Shabbatish. That makes sense?
Yes.
Right. So I think that's kind of to try to save, to save the Shabbatiness of the day.
Save the Shabbatiness.
Mm-hmm. I think it's to try to preserve the Shabbat, Shabbat atmosphere. Yeah. So here we are in the readings, and we're not going to get too much into the content of what the readings are for the first day, because this is about navigating the Siddur and Mahzor, and not necessarily about. Hang on 1 second. Hi, we're just trying to get somebody into the class who was locked out. What was I saying? I was saying something about the...
We're not going to go into the Torah portion itself.
Right, because this is a class on navigating the Mahzor. We're not going to get too much into the context or the content of what we're reading, except for I do want to get a little bit into the Haftarah on that content. But there is a difference between what we read on the first day and what we read on the second day, except for the maftir. So part of this is one of the things I want to point out is a difference structurally, because this class is about structure, is a difference between how we treat liturgically the structure of the readings on Rosh Hashanah versus the readings on other types of holidays. So there are other holidays where the Torah readings might mirror each other a little bit more closely. Even then, usually the first day and the second day have different Torah readings. The first day and the second day of Rosh Hashanah have clearly different Torah readings. You probably know them pretty clearly because you've probably heard them droshed really clearly out by rabbis over many years, right? What's the first day Torah reading about?
The
Akedat Yitzchak.
Right, so it's Abraham and Hagar, right? He heard the cry of the boy, right? And Avimelech and
the second day is
and then on the second day is the right, exactly, is the Akedat Yitzchak.
Yep.
So
Rosh Hashanah never occurs on the second day never occurs on a Saturday, on Shabbat, right?
The second day never occurs on a Saturday. Calendarically, it cannot. Yeah, that's correct. But the maftir reading is the same. Why is the maftir reading the same? Let's take a look at the content for a minute. Let's look at it in the English. We don't have to read the whole thing, but will someone read the first like three verses in English in the seventh month on the first day of the month?
In the seventh month on the first day of the month, you shall observe a sacred occasion. You shall not work at your occupation. You shall observe it as a day when the horn is sounded. You shall present a burnt offering of pleasing odor to Hashem. 1 bull of the herd, 1 ram, and 7 yearling lambs without blemish. The grain offering with them, choice flour with oil mixed in, shall be 3/10 of a measure for the bull, 2/10 for a ram, and 1/10 for each of the 7 lambs.
Very, very good. So I think that's enough to maybe give us a hint. Why is this the maftir for both the first and the second days of Rosh Hashanah, even if we distinctly, both in the land of Israel and not in the land of Israel, observe the 2 days no matter what as 2 different days of the holiday? Why do we read this same maftir for both days?
We have the same offering for both days.
Right. Right. Well, it says on the first of the month, so how could...
Well, the offerings are the same the second day.
Yeah. I would say because we're treating both days as the first day of the month, right? Because of the way that we observe Rosh Chodesh, right? Because of the way Rosh Chodesh gets observed, that's why. Because of that treatment calendarically being different than the way that we treat 2 days of Yom Tov, right? So we're treating this as Rosh Chodesh. So we read that same on both of those days. And there's no difference, by the way, even if you weren't worried about like the calendar thing, or if that doesn't make so much sense to you, it's also just a way of saying the maftir reading is unlike where the Torah readings are different content stories from an earlier section, a story-heavy Genesis, reading about our avot, that it's taking us through something that might be sort of a moral or ethical narrative portion of the Torah. The maftir for Rosh Hashanah is an instructional on how to observe this holiday, and it just makes sense to read it on both days of the holiday, right? It just is an instructional. It's a different piece of the content, and it makes sense to read it on both days of the holiday. So it's stuck. So it's there for both days of the holiday. Okay, so we read the same maftir, both days, and then we get to Haftorah. The Haftorah on the, let's skip over some Mishaberos. The Haftorah on the first day is from the first. It's from the book of Samuel, okay, and it's the story of who?
Hannah.
Hannah. This is my favorite. Makes me weep every year. It's the best. It's a story about prayer. It's a story about misperceptions of people. It's a story about Eli the priest. It's a story about dedication to temple service. It's a story about wanting. It's a story about wanting a child and not getting one. It's a story. I mean, it's great drama. It's a story about sister wives not getting along. It's a very good story. And it also is narrative that at some point ends and goes into a prayer, which mimics another reading that was picked for the High Holy Days too that does that. Can you think of another reading on the, let me show you first, and then I'll ask you to think of another reading that does that. Look here where you can even tell the way the book is edited. So here you have the story, right? Vayhi ish echad min haramatayim sofim. So you have a story of the man, but then actually the story isn't about a man at all. It's about women. But anyway, that's for another class I'll teach on the beginning of the book of Shmuel. And so you can tell this whole thing is about Elkanah, and then Hashem remembers Hannah, and then she conceives, and yay. And then we have V'tipalel Hannah v'tomar, right? And we have her whole prayer. And then you get a whole prayer of Hannah. What does this remind you of? Where else in the High Holy Day liturgy do we have something very similar? A Haftarah that begins narratively and at some point dips into, and then they prayed. It's a fun trivia question. I should have brought like prizes. I'll give you a hint. It's not on Rosh Hashanah.
Jonah?
Yeah, Jonah. When Jonah is down in the fish, which we may get to in 2 more classes from now, when Jonah is down in the fish, Jonah prays.
That's right.
And it is fully a text of prayer, just as this is. It is not narrative. We just get the full text of Jonah's prayer. I love this as a chazan. The reason why I'm pointing this out to you is you're like, people on the podcast can't watch me like literally moving to the edge of my seat and how excited I am about this. But it's like the convergence of all the categories at once. And when I say to you, Shirat Hayam is a biblical poem, right? So it's a biblical quote that converges with poetry that gets stuck in the Siddur. This is so great because we're in the middle of High Holy Day services, and the biblical character who gets misunderstood by Eli the priest up on the temple mount where she goes up to where her family is like barbecuing, basically, okay, where she goes up to pray, to offer up a spontaneous supplication of a barren woman, and she gets misunderstood there. We get the text of her prayer, right? We get text, we get actual, like, here's what she prayed, and gives us an example of her. And it's actually from her later in rabbinic literature that we learn. There's a beautiful text I didn't bring for us to learn from, because again, not this class, but we could learn it together if you're interested in it. The rabbis of our Talmud want to learn from Hannah how we pray, right? That actually the volume at which she prayed is an exemplary volume to pray at, the volume where it goes from between your mouth and your ears, which is the example of why people kind of whisper while they pray. You know, we learn from Hannah how to pray. And so I love that our Haftorah even shows us, here's a really great way to pray. And it's preparatory for us because we're about to finish up the Torah service and go and pray Musaf. Okay, so that's the prayer that is contained within our Haftorah. And then we finish it and we skip this Haftorah because we're not doing this Haftorah that day. And then we go straight over to skip this. This is a really lovely healing service found in the middle of the optional. It's great. And then we go to, we'll skip over prayer for lovely prayer for our country. Sure, fine. Then shofar service, which we do not do on Shabbat. We don't do shofar on Shabbat. Go to 119, and here's the shofar service. Everything up until this middle paragraph is optional stuff. Middle paragraph is where the real meat and potatoes begin. Tofu and green beans, whatever. And we can read this piece of liturgy in the middle. Mina Meitzar Karatia Anani Vamerchavya. Bonnie and I know it well because we sing it in our music and mindfulness class every week, thanks to Deborah Saxman's awesome melody. And you might know some of these lines from Hallel, lines of praise and prayer. And then we have this little back and forth. The person responsible for playing shofar blesses before playing, and then you need somebody to actually call to them so that they're not responsible for looking at a sheet while they're playing. So you have them listening to the shofar calls, and then they're playing out these shofar blasts. So that's what's happening. That's what's listed here on the page, is basically the blueprint, the map of them praying. That's the whole shofar service. People make a very big deal about shofar service, but this is it. That's the whole shofar service right there, those 2 paragraphs. That's shofar service. It is a big deal to hear shofar. The shofar service is short and sweet. When we finish that, there's a bonus ashrei, a bonus 2 lines that are some of my favorite lines in the whole Siddur. Ashrei ham yodei teruah Adonai be'or panecha yahalechu. Joyous are the people who experience the calling of the shofar, Adonai. They walk be'or panecha. They walk by the light of your presence. I think that's like the theme of this year. People, like, hearing the shofar was number 1 in our poll for what people wanted for. It's like they knew. It's like the Mahzor knew, right? That's what people want to hear on Rosh Hashanah. So, dear to my heart, and great lines in our Mahzor. B'shimcha yegilun kol hayom uv tzidkatecha yarumu. They all day long, they continuously yilu. They rejoice in your name and they are uplifted in your righteousness. So that's it. That's like how we close out the Torah service. Those are great lines. And then we do the regular ashrei. It's just boring old ashrei. And then Yahalelu. We close out the Torah service exactly as we do on Shabbat. It's identical. There's nothing to navigate here. You just either do the Shabbat psalm or you do the non-Shabbat psalm. There's really nothing fancy to navigate. You do one or the other. It depends on if it's Shabbat. And Uvnucho Yomar Eitz Chaim Hi. That's the whole thing, okay? That's the end of Torah service. There's nothing fancy. Then Chatzi Kaddish, which looks so unimposing, but this is the biggie. This is the one. This is the one everyone's been waiting for. And I have no idea what I'm going to do this year because I can't say it when I'm standing alone in the sanctuary doing this traditional and truncated service that I'm leading both days of Musaf. And I have no clue what I'm going to do in that moment. So if you have ideas, email me. But, this is that moment. This is it. This is the iconic one. Everyone's waiting for it. I don't know if I'm just going to sing maybe just for fun, but I'm going to miss it this year is what I'm saying. And then, depending on where you are, you may just go into Tefillah B'Lachash, okay, quiet whispered Amidah, and you got to page your way through. One thing that I want to point out here is even more substantially and significantly than Shacharit, the content here of Tefillah B'Lachash, of the quiet Amidah, is much skinnier than the content of the repeated one, okay? Because we're not doing everything. There's extra stuff in the repetition, but it's long. It takes people a long time to get through for a few reasons. One is this just a lot of content, and another is when you're doing it, it's been a year, right, since you put these words in your mouth, and so it takes me I'm a fast davener, and it takes me a long time to get through this Amidah. Look at this business. It's a long Amidah. There you go. That's the end of it. Okay. When you get through the whole Amidah, here you go, Jeff. You asked where's the Hineni. Look at this. On 139, you get to the end of the concluding the Amidah, right? The whispered Amidah, and then you get to the Hineni. This is the the prayer of the prayer leader. There's a beautiful version of a female leader. The reason why they did this whole gender binary split out of the text of the prayer of the female leader is that there's literally a nice beard referenced in the prayer of the male leader. Like there's some very gendered language in the Hineni, which is why there's a split off version. Before I move on from Hineni, let me pause here. Any questions or thoughts arising? Okay. This is like the part in the service where, first of all, usually we've all paused for a sermon and then people are like, should we go home to eat or not? There's like, I'm skipping over that part. And second of all, it's very important to think about our prayer fatigue too at this point. Because remember, we've had like classes splitting up between this, but that's a long morning already at that point. And now we're just getting to Musaf, and Musaf is just getting to the meat of things. So that's a lot. Jeff, yes.
Question? Just looking back a little bit. Well, first of all, the word balachash means together, no?
In a whisper.
In a whisper, okay. But I see part of shofar blowing. Oh, that's not shofar blowing. If you look back at page like 137, there's the shofrot part.
So
that's in the repetition.
In some communities, not ours, in some communities, not in Shir Chadash or Beitenu, but in some communities, the shofar is actually blown in the middle of the whispered Amidah. Mm. And that is why that's notated even in the whispered Amidah. We choose not to disrupt in our community. It's not our minhag. It's not our custom. But that's why it's noted there. I'm glad you caught that. That's a great catch. Okay. Deep breath. We're about to have some super fun with this Musaf service. Before we do it, I want to look back at the playbill, okay? Because I want us to know this structure going in. Because this is the whole point of this class, was really leading up to this moment. Honestly, this is like the climactic, we need a prayer playbill for this. You ready? Okay. So, well, you know what? Hang on. Come back to this for a minute. Does this look familiar? Like, it looks familiar, right? Super familiar. What parts are going to be, what parts are going to be the same? The beginning, the middle, or the end? What are going to be shared? The beginning?
So shared between what?
Meaning what are going to be the familiar parts, and what are going to be the new parts? What did I say are like the overlapping with all the usual, and what are going to be the new?
The beginning and the end.
Right. The beginning and the end are going to be absolutely super duper familiar.
That's what I would have said too.
All right. So here we go. We are going to look through the familiar parts and see if we can identify it. You know, we're going to tease this out together first. I think we're ready for this. Let's see if we can do it. Here we go. We're going to try this together. When we look at this together, we see the same identical content, including diversions, identical to what we did in Shacharit. Same beginning of Avot with the diversions of Misod HaChamim, right? That little miniature supplication, and Zochreinu. Then we go to the next page. We get to the Melech Ozer, Atag Dibor, Mechalkel Chaim, the little Michamocha, and the Ne'eman. Identical to Shacharit. Don't believe me? Go to Shacharit. It is exactly the same. Identical. Then we get to Uvecheinu lecha ta'alei kedusha ki ata Eloheinu melech. The ark is open, and here is our first big diversion. What's this?
Anatokef.
Anatokef. Unatanatokef. Now this is in the spot that Barbara pointed out before, is like, wait a minute, it's not even Kedusha yet. Hang on. Like, this seems a little disruptive. So, yes, once again, we get something that is in the disruptive spot pre-Kedusha, but it is so structurally, right, this is what you're starting to notice and navigating it. You've got your avot, you've got your gevurot. We are anticipating Kedusha, but we're not to Kedusha yet. The uvechein ulecha ta'alei kedusha, that line in Shachar, you're just going to have to believe me. Actually, I'll tell you the page number to go to so you can see it. If you turn back, if you have the Siddur in front of you, if you turn back to page, hang on, I want you to be able to look at it so you can be excited. Hang on. If you turn back to page 86 in your Mahzor, but hold this page still. Just so you believe your Cantor that she knows what she's talking about.
Oh yeah, look at that.
Okay, this is the beginning of Kedusha on the High Holy Days. This is like the Ki Shem Adoshem Echra Havu Godel Elokeinu, right? This is the intro to Kedusha, but it's like, but hang on a second, I've got a great poem for you, right? This is what the Siddur and Mahzor love to do. And this is why I'm giving you the tools to notice and notice and notice. Structurally, we're just getting a little boop, a disruption, but a disruption for a great poem. Now, this poem has 2 prose sections to it, and then a super poetic-y poem. I don't know. I should take a class in poetry. Okay, but it has 2 prose sections, right? Unatana tokef kedushat hayom ki hu nora v'ayom. It does rhyme. So there's stuff I can point to here. It's a very poetic section. It is about the kedushat hayom. Remember, that's a thing that we're going to get into in any Amidah on a big day. And it's all about the Chotem Yad Kol Adambo. It's all about this book of remembrance-ness. Remember I said all of the stuff that gets stuck in this section, Zochreinu l'chaim melech chafetz v'chaim, it's all about this remember us in the book of life. God is chofetz chaim, God is desirous of life. It's all about, what about the book of life, remember us for life here. And that's what this whole section is going to be about. What's going to happen on that day? We're going to get a story. Uva shofar gadol yitzerka, and the big shofar is going to be sounded. V'kol demama daka yishama, right? Umalachim yichafezun v'chil urada yochezun. Still rhyming. Everyone know that great 1973 version of this? It's so good. I'll send you links. It's wonderful. It's a great story too. Familiar? No, it's great version. I will send you great links. And then a poem. Berosh Hashana yikatevun, uviyom zom kipori chatevun. Chama yavrun v'chama ibareun, mi yichye umi yamut. And this is all, again, thematically about who will live, who will die, written in the book of life, not written in the book of life, what's going to happen, all poetic. And it's going to tell us what can lessen the decree, tshuva, tefillah, tzedakah. Ma'avirin, they lessen, they move, they push over roa gezerah. If you want a class on this, I'll give you 30 podcasts, 14 books, 20 doctoral theses, 60 wonderful dress show. This is not the class for that, but it is a beautiful, beautiful piece of our text. And we are still in the middle of a giant poetic disruption. Let me give you a sneak preview. Look one page over. We're getting to Kedusha. We're almost there, but we're not there. We have one more page of disruption. Do you see we're almost there? You're with me structurally? We're almost to that third part, Kedusha, but we're still in the disruption here. We're in Ki Kishimcha, Adam Yesodo, Ein Kitzpah. So we're still in this poetic section that's all about who will live and who will die. Ki Kishimcha, Kain Tehilatecha. God, Adam Yesodo Me'afar V'sofo Le'afar. Human beings are created from dust, and our end is dust. Okay, and then Ein Kitzpah Lishnatecha. There are beautiful chazanut pieces to each piece of this. All of these are completely poetic additions to this text. None of them are part of. Do you see any brachot in here? I don't think there are any biblical quotes in here. I'm pretty sure. I don't think I'm wrong about that. It is all just gorgeous additional poetry that we love to say because it's wonderful to ruminate, and also like melancholic, but wonderful to ruminate at least once a year on the fragility of life as we have it. And then Aseh Laman Shemecha, officially, we are into Kedusha at the bottom of this page.
Can I jump in with a question from the previous page?
Sure.
At the bottom of the page, where all of the who will live and who shall die, et cetera, mm-hmm. The commentary, when we really begin, written by Stanley Rabinowitz, et cetera, and that goes on to the next page, which appears to be a long poem based on that, but different. I don't know if it's a poem or a song, but it appears to be a repetition because there's 2 lines in regular type and 2 lines in italics. Do you know anything about that?
I've never paid attention to it before, but it seems lovely.
Oh, I can afford to do that because you're going through the text, you know.
Right. This is right. Again, this is like the worst part of being a chazan is that I'm way too busy to look at the best stuff in the book. But that's great. Thank you for pointing that out.
It looks very interesting.
Looks very interesting. That's great. This bottom part of the text takes us straight into the Kedusha proper. Aseh Laman Shemecha. Let's get a little bit bigger. The Kadesh et Shimcha al Makdishei Shemecha. Are we starting to sound Kedusha-ish in our language?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Ba'avor Kevod Shimcha Hana'aratz V'Hanikdash. Do you recognize some of the roots from that are similar to Kedusha? Na'aritzacha or right Nikadesh. Very, very similar language to our usual ones, to our usual Kedushas. So this is our intro. This is our little intro to tell us that we're actually going to get into Kedusha proper. And here we go. Kesod Siach Sarfei Kodesh. Jump right in. Hamatishim Shimcha Bakodesh. Dare Mala Im Dare Mata. Slightly different than usual, okay? But Dare is like a way of talking about like mystical creatures. Kakatu al yad neviyecha v'karazel zev ve'amar, and the rest of this page, absolutely and completely like a normal Yom Tov Amidah. Right? Do you see anything out of place here? No. Tune-wise, does anybody know where we go with this? Does anyone know what we hint at with this?
Don't we go into the 3 different, the Zikra note and the 3 of them, the Shofarot, and what's the third one?
Yeah, we're about to get into the Malchuyot section next. And we're going to get into the 3 sections. But tune-wise, when we go into the music here, we're going to actually quote from the Avodah service. We're going to borrow from the Avodah service when we go into the Kedusha. So the custom here is to do Kisod Siha Sarfei Kodesh. So it's to quote from the Avodah service and to anticipate the Avodah service that is coming later. What's cool about that? Why do that at Musaf?
Anticipation
Of what?
of the Kedusha. I mean, of the, I don't know.
I mean, there's no Avodah service on Rosh Hashanah. So it definitely doesn't, on the surface, make sense to do it, right? But if you start to think about it, it's like, wait a minute, why are we doing the Avodah service? But then, what's the Avodah service about?
I would guess if it's Avodah, it probably had something to do with what happened in the temple.
Right. It's about the Kohen Gadol and what happened
Yeah.
in the most sacred and liminal moment in the Holy of Holies, right? At the most kind of tenuous moment, dramatic moment. And Musaf is our one lingering vestigial piece of our liturgy that preserves, at least in symbolic form, avodat kodesh, right? It basically is our like sacrificial offering. That's what Musaf is. A Musaf was a sacrificial offering. Does that make sense? Right? Does that make any sense to anybody else here? Maybe you reject my comparative analysis, but I think that that's how we wound up with that, is this idea that we're sort of pre-quoting the Avodah service because, hey, we're in Musaf, and Musaf is about Avodah. It's the priestly work. That's what we do every week in Musaf, but we're in the High Holy Day season, so we're sort of pre-quoting the Avodah service, which is about the priests, and this is a service that mimics the priestly work, right? So Musaf is about the Musaf sacrificial offering.
Wait, so let me understand. You say we're not doing Avodah. What are you referring to structurally? Where's Avodah?
So the Avodah service is only done on Yom Kippur. But every Musaf, all throughout the High Holy Days, does this Kisod Si Ha Ha Sarvei Kodesh. It does this like thing, or I should say Chazanim do this thing, or leaders do this thing. And I think that this reference to Avodah has to do with, hey, we're in the part of the service that's like, oh, we don't do sacrifices anymore, but we do Musaf, right? And I think that that's where we're going with it. I think that's how that quote wound up being there. I don't know. It's maybe cooler to me than others. What's that?
Is it linked with the tune?
Yes, that's the tune for the Avodah service.
That's why I can't do this. I'm not very good at tunes.
Yes, it is the tune for the Avodah service.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. And then we finish with that tune at the bottom of this page, but we don't finish Kedusha, because look at the bottom of the page. Uvdivrei kodecha katuv le'emor yimloch Adonai le'olam Elohai Zion ledor vador. Hallelujah. Ledor vador nagid godlecha ol netzach netzachim kedushatcha nakdish v'shivracha Eloheinu mipino lo yamush le'olam va'ed ki el melech gadol v'kadosh atah. Where's the Chatima? Not here.
More.
You have to wait for it. It gets put off a little bit, and we get a poem. It even says so. It says a piyut. See? Look. That was very nice of the editors to tell us. It's a piyut, and it's called Bechol Ma'aminim. Right? You might know some tunes to it. First, we get a little Chamol Al Ma'asecha, which is a beautiful little tune, a beautiful little poem in and of itself. We do Chamol Al Ma'asecha, and then we have this optional piyut here, Bechol Ma'aminim, which you may or may not know a tune or two to. And then we get a few paragraphs of that. We'll skip over to 148 at the bottom of that page, where we get to Tusgav Levadecha, which is after that piyut closes. One little paragraph which quotes from the prophet Zechariah, and it is a quote that you probably know pretty well. The Haya Adonai Lamelech Okol Haaretz Bayom Hahu Yihye Adonai Echad Ushmo Echad, because Aleinu, right? Which we're gonna get to in like a page. But first, Uvachain. Does that look familiar? Remember Uvachains? Right? So let's go back. Structurally, what happened? Let's go back. You ready? What happened structurally? We're going back. We had Avot, Giburot, and then Winatana Tokef disrupted us, and then we got to Kedusha. We did our Kedusha, but then the Kedusha left us hanging. We didn't have a Chatima. We didn't get to a Chatima. We got disrupted by a poem. So we're still hanging. We don't have our Chatima for Kedusha because it's left us hanging. And we're moving through this weird poem. Not weird, it's a lovely poem, but it's just weird that it disrupted us. We're still hanging. Tuskav Levadecha with a little Zachariah quote. Get to the next page, and we're in the Uvachains. Same stuff. You'll have to believe me. I could give you the page, but, well, I'll give you the page. It's identical to page 87 earlier. You can look back at it if you want to. Okay, it's identical Uvachains. There's no difference between this and that one. It's sung the same way, too. Next page, another piyut. People love this piyut. Okay?
Excuse me. All those piyut in between that you pastor, you don't do them all. You just pick and choose one or two, or what?
Absolutely, Barbara. We would go nuts if we did all of them. Although I do know some services where they do all of them, and then they get out at 2:30. So, yeah, definitely we pick and choose. You're absolutely right. Or we might choose to do some paragraphs from them. Yeah. And so this is Vayatayu, right? V'yitnu lecha keter melucha. Right? That's a great one to crown you as with the crown of sovereignty. It's really cool. It's got a catchy tune.
Doc Ackerman used to tear that one up.
Yeah, that's a great one. And then, oh boy, we get to finish Kedusha. Second paragraph on the page. Finally, we get to finish Kedusha. First paragraph on the page we don't quite get to yet. A little paragraph about the Timlo Chata Adonai Levadecha. Just like about, you can roll through it in the English if it's helpful to you. You, God alone, are going to be the sovereign over all the creations and nations, and sort of a prediction that you're going to rule over everyone. We get a little Yimloch Adonai Leolam Elohai Zion Ledor Vador Hallelujah, because I think this is just my thought in terms of like the structure is we've been so disrupted in our Kedusha that we need a little, do you guys like to say reprise or reprise? I sound very American saying reprise, so I'll say reprise, okay? We're getting a little, what's that?
What's wrong with being American?
I don't know. Well, I think I sound like mildly uneducated as somebody who loves musical theater, I should say, not like American. I think I sound like, there's nothing wrong with being American. I sound like I don't know what I'm talking about. Maybe, I'm not sure. Reprise. We get back to Yimloch because it's been so long. It's like, whoops, we need a little jog of our memory. So we get back to Yimloch Adonai Leolam Elohai Zion Ledor Vador Hallelujah. And then we get a little miniature Kedusha paragraph, a Chatima, to finish us up because we got to be done. But remember that the Chatima, the signature of the signature, the Chatima Shel Chatima of the Kedusha on the High Holy Days is not Ha'el HaKadosh, it's HaMelech HaKadosh, right? Okay. So we get through Kadosh Atav and Orash Shemecha Ve'ena Loach Mi Baladecha. It's a little poetic, but it's not a poem. It is intended to be just prayer straight through and through. Then Atav V'chartanu Mikol Ha'amim Mahafta Otanu V'ratzita Banu. We start getting into a section that is very Musafi. Now we are getting into the heart and soul, right? Like the bread and butter of what Musaf is anytime we get a Musaf. So we get into chosenness for a little paragraph. Atav v'chartanu mikol amim. You've chosen us from all people. Ahafta otanu v'ratzita manu. You've loved us. You've desired us. You've lifted us up from all the different tongues. V'kidashtanu mitzotecha. You sanctified us in your commandments. V'kerav-tanu malkeinu levodatecha. You brought us close in your avodah, right? Remember I mentioned the avodah part? V'shimcha hagadol hakadosh aleinu karata. You've called upon us with your great and holy name. Okay. V'titan lanu Eloheinu b'ahavat yom, if it's Shabbos, also this. You placed upon us the Yom HaShabbat hazeh, Yom HaZikaron hazeh, Yom Zichron Shruah B'Hava Mikrei Kodesh Zecher Litziat Mitzrayim. You've given us this Rosh Hashanah and Shabbat if it's Shabbat, okay? And then we get to this Musaf section. Umipnei Chata'enu Galinu Me'aratzenu. And because of our sins, we have been exiled from our land. V'nitrachaknu me'ol admatenu. This is a tikbolet. I keep bringing up this language. This is a parallelism, and it just means the same. We're just saying the same thing twice to make us feel worse, I guess. We have been made distant from upon our land, right? And now we can't do what we are required to do, right? You guys have enough. Is this translation helping? This live I'm live translating. Is it helpful, or can you just look at the English and skip the? Oh, okay.
What's helpful?
Okay. So we can't do what we're supposed to do anymore because we're really far away from our land. In the house that you chose. Remember, there was supposed to be this big house that was sacred that was supposed to be called by your name. With the extended hand in your sanctity. May it be the will before you, Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu. You know what that means. Melech Rachama, King of Mercy. Hameshiv banim ligvulam, shetashuvu trachem aleinu be'al mikdashecha, b'rachamecha rabim, v'tivnehu mehera utgadel kevodo. So, this is compassionate king or sovereign who brings back the children or descendants to their promised land, that you might once again mercifully bring compassion on us and return us in mercy to your sanctuary. So this is pretty theologically, some people are like, whoa, that's my line, right? This is solidly conservative movement-ish theology that's a line for some, this is a certain Jewish theology here. You know what I'm saying? Right? This is like, bring us back to, we miss the avodah that you asked us to do. We miss that sacred work. Bring us back to that land. Okay? So this is like, bring us back from our scattered places on earth. Bring us back to this place. Allow us to do musaf, not like we're praying it now, but like Musaf was meant to be, is my summary of this page. Okay? That's what this page is. If you have feelings about that, I'd love to hear about them at the end. We're going to do about 2 more pages, and then we're going to have to pause after Malchuyot. We'll make it through the end of Musaf next time. But this has been really fun. We're going to get through a little bit more, and then we'll pause. We're just going to do the top half of the next page. The bottom half is very creative. Top half of the next page, Yom HaShabbat. If it's Shabbos, we have to also mention the Musaf sacrifices for Shabbat. And then we mention the Musaf sacrifices specifically on the bottom here. The other reason I had you read out loud what the Maftir Aliyah was for both days of Rosh Hashanah is because, oh look, it's back. See? Right, we get to pray it again, right here. You get to pray it in Musaf, okay? It's right here again. That makes sense? That's our Musaf prayer is also we're praying it. That we get to, but we're praying it, it's stuck in here structurally, like, let's do it again. So we are now post Kedusha. What do you do in Musaf on Rosh Hashanah? Post Kedusha, you start talking about the sacred work that we were once asked to do and missed doing. And here's what we would have done, and here's what we wish we could be returned to doing again. And we recall what we just chanted directly from the Torah scroll. Yismechu, which we would do if we had Shabbat normally. And then we skip this middle section. It's extra. Just skip your eyes over it. We go to Ochila La'el, which is a little miniature, beautiful, poetic piece that is another sort of plea that we can. It's like another miniature Hineni situation that ends with Yihiyul Ratzonim Repi Vehagyon Libi Lefanecha Adonai Tzuri V'Goali. Right, another miniature Hineni, like open up. May I humbly be ready to offer up my praise before you again. That's basically what this page is Ochel El page. And then we get to Malchuyot, right? So structurally we go Avot, Gevurot. We get a little pause for the Unatana Tokef section where we talk about God writing us in the book of life. Kedusha, but we don't quite finish it. We get some Uvachain paragraphs in there. And then we get to finish Kedusha and talk a bunch about the sacrifices we miss making. And then we get into the big three. And we're only going to do the first of the big three for just like a second, okay? This is where Aleinu originated. We stole it from here because it was so good to stick it in our daily davening. It's so good. It's such a great piece. For a great history on Aleinu, I commend to you learning it from Rabbi Avi Havivi or a number of other places, but he has a great shiur on it, a great class on it. Here, what I want to talk about structurally is, first of all, there's the first of three sections that are going to have a very particular structure. I want to walk you through that structure in a minute. Second of all, we are going to actually fully bow down here, which is a very rare thing in Jewish prayer these days, and I think that's a very cool thing. So I just want to take a moment to mention that. The Netilat Apayim, the falling down on our face, happens a lot more on Yom Kippur than it does on Rosh Hashanah, but here it actually happens on Rosh Hashanah. I want to show you the structure. Here's how each of these sections work. There's an opening gambit of some kind. The biggie is Aleinu at Malchuyot. The other two sections, less exciting in their openings, but Malchuyot, Aleinu is like strong start. So that's the big opening, is an Aleinu paragraph up until the Al Haaretz Mitachat Einod, and then forget about this page. This is extra, okay? It's lovely, but we don't need to do Lade Adim Locha. It's just a piyut. It's lovely. Here's the second paragraph. You're used to seeing Al Kein Nekaveh Lecha Adonai Eloheinu. It just gets stuck over here. It's an extra poetic addition here. And then we get into three sections. We get verses on the theme of Malchuyot. Actually, they highlight, can you tell? Can you see? They highlight the words that are related to the root Melech are highlighted here. Do you see that? It's very cool. Yimloch and Melech. These verses are Kakatuv B'Torah Techa, as it's written in your Torah. These are Uvdivrei Kodecha Katuv Lemor. These are verses that are written from the book of Psalms in the next section. And then the next section are going to be verses from Nevi'im on the same theme. And then we're always going to get, followed by that, a section of blessing of some kind that ends in a chatima of blessing, like Mekadesh Yisrael V'Yom HaZikaron here, followed by blasts of the shofar, Hayom Harat Olam, and Areshet Sefatenu. So it's always going to go, going back, opening gambit, followed by Torah verses, more biblical verses from Psalms, more biblical verses from another section in the Torah, in this case, prophets. And then we're going to get these are, what do you call that, like, that midway type of blessing, right? That begin with Eloheinu V'Elahei Avotenu, the blessing, right? All the way down here. And finally, Shofar Blast, Hayom, Areshet. That structure is going to take us through all three sections of Musaf. And when we're done with that, we're going to get the identical structure that we got for the other. Ritzei, Modim, Sim Shalom. Like every other Amidah. So we'll finish that part up next time. Okay? I mean, it's not even Rosh Hashanah and I'm exhausted davening this. It's a long Amidah. But I feel we're getting there. Are you with me? It's 8:53 at night, and it's a lot of text in the Mahzor. But you with me? You got this? What questions do you have?
Where do you start? Do you start for Torah service, or do you start at Musaf?
Well, I would like to start at Musaf. On a normal year, I'm usually asked to start at the beginning of the Torah service, and I usually acquiesce. This year, I will be doing all sorts of strange things. So the first day, I'm going to start at Haftorah, following the sermon of Rabbi Shapiro, which will air from 10:30 to 10:40 something, like 10:50 or something. And then I'll take over from Haftorah to the end of that service. And then the second day, I'm going to be in that service kind of soup to nuts. I'll be present in the room. I won't daven all of it, but I'll be in there soup to nuts.
But routinely, you would start after Torah service, right?
I'd like to, but I usually do Torah service.
You usually do Torah service.
I do. They ask me every year, and I acquiesce. I don't know
because
why.
in the library minyan, the person that does Shacharit does Torah service, and then we have somebody take over. Or
yeah, I like doing just Musaf. It's a lot of stuff already. I'm usually pretty tired, but you know, I want to do my part. Jeff, yes.
Yes, so this is the repetition of the Amidah.
Correct.
For any Zoom service, a non-minion service, what happens?
Great question. Larry Herman and I had a wonderful conversation this week about exactly that. Every service is going to approach this a little differently. Here's what I've decided to do, unless somebody comes along and says, nope, you shouldn't do that. But I'm pretty sure here's what I'm going to do. Are you ready? On the first day in the traditional and truncated service, meaning if you tune into the service that's anchored in the sanctuary, which is starting with Rabbi Kligfeld and then ending with me, here's what you're going to get for Musaf. When we get to Musaf, we're going to do Hinani. We can't do Chatzi Kaddish. And then we're going to go right into the Amidah, which we will do out loud all the way through together. Meaning there's not going to be a repetition. It's going to be one Amidah out loud, which I will be davening as my private Amidah, but done out loud, which I can opt to add things into that I wouldn't normally add into my private Amidah, that are like adding in Piyutim into the private Amidah. And I'll, ahead of time, appoint somebody on Zoom to be unmuted, to be my MC, to call page numbers for the skipping through the Siddur. In order to accomplish that, we'll have to actually daven our private Amidah, as I will and anybody else who's following with me, from the repetition part in order to get all the content in there, but it'll involve a little bit of skipping. It should be fine. That's for the first day. The second day, my intention is to do something different. It's to have everybody have a moment, and by moment I mean like 14 minutes, to daven our private Amidahs. And then when we finish davening our private whispered Amidah, we'll go back and we will not do a full repetition because we can't, but we'll go through and starting with Zochrenu, do all the parts that we would want to sing going along through it. We'll just skip the parts we can't do without a minyan, which are substantial.
I see. So you'll pick and choose the traditional melodies that you can do, you don't need to do with the minyan, or okay.
Exactly. And the second day I can imagine, the first day I imagine the experience people have on the other end is, oh, the chazan is basically davening through, except for the parts that you really cannot do without a minyan. The second day, I think people will hear me stopping and doing a kavanah, and okay, and they'll hear me announce, we're gonna go to the next page. So
haven't we reached the point of, after 5+ months, of feeling like maybe when we're doing it on Zoom that we're really doing it with a minyan, and we can do some of the things that you would normally only do with a minyan? I mean, you do it for people to say, yes, I mean, not Yisker, but Kaddish.
Well, I completely agree with that. I don't understand why, under the circumstances of this day and age, with so much being compromised just to get people present, even on Zoom, why it can't constitute a minyan if you have one on Zoom. I mean, I know that halachically it's got to be in the same room, but, this is kind of unusual times.
Yeah, this is special time.
Right.
I agree.
It certainly is a special time. I know that that's what has pushed us to make the decision that we've made when it comes to the mourner's Kaddish over everything else. I don't know, and I want to offer you a miniature drash on this, which I feel I'm not giving away. I already know what the content is for my second day Rosh Hashanah sermon, and I know I'm not giving it away by giving you this Torah. So I'll give you a mini drash.
I won't remember anyway.
What's that?
I won't remember anyway. So
good. Okay, all right. Good.
Joel, you're not senile yet.
Joel, maybe I'll invite you to come in here. I have to pre-record my Josh, so maybe I'll invite you to the pre-recording party, and then you'll forget and you'll hear it again.
Yeah, I'll definitely forget.
Perfect. Okay, so here's the mini Josh in response to your question, Barbara. Okay, so there's this idea, Shuv Yom Lifnei Mitatcha. You should make.
I forgot. What did you say?
Very good. There is where's the mute button? No. There is, the idea is to repent one day before you die. And the theology behind that is an awareness that you might die any day, right? That you cannot possibly know where you are located in your own mortality story. You just can't. It's not possible to know where you're located in your own mortality narrative. It's possible that I am at the beginning of my life, that at some point I'm in my 30s, and therefore it is possible that at some point, by the time I'm in my 50s or 60s, cryogenic freezing, just blossoms as an idea, and they're able to upload this is the beginning of my 1,000 years of existence. I could die tomorrow. Or I'm smack in the middle of my life, and this is, and I'm going to die at a nice even age of whatever. So I have no idea where I'm located in my mortality narrative, and that accepting not knowing where I am in my mortality narrative, accepting that I'm in a free fall of that mortality narrative, will help me to be better every day. That's the idea behind that concept. It's very deep for a one-liner throwaway. That is how I feel right now about this pandemic, meaning what is so damaging to me is anyone who asserts that they know where we are vis-a-vis the narrative of this pandemic. Oh, we're at the beginning of this. Oh, we're just in the middle of this. Oh, we're at the end of this thing. I don't know. So Barbara, if I could tell you we're just at the beginning of this, or we're in the middle of this, or we're at the end of this, I would have such a better answer for you when it comes to how we ought to decide on this vis-a-vis how flexible, how stretchy we ought to be, how emergent our halachic decision should be in response to this. Because if I could say, if every trustworthy physician were to say, folks, this is, years, we're in this for years, please do not, gather. I would say, sure, the CGLS should probably start gathering that tshuva together right now. But because we're simultaneously thinking like that, and also the other half of people are trying to figure out how we can get 100 people on Ziering Family Field, and there's such conflicting narratives around that, I feel stuck. So that was not as short a Josh as I thought I was going to give on it, but that's where I feel stuck about it, is like, if I knew where we were vis-a-vis the narrative, I would feel so confident about how flexible the halachic response should be.
You're talking right out of the 60s, babe, all this cosmic stuff.
Can I ask a question I haven't really gotten an answer to yet? So you're going to be in the sanctuary, right, doing this?
I will be in the sanctuary for most of Rosh Hashanah, correct? Yeah.
Okay. And with at least one person, or by yourself?
By myself.
By yourself, okay. The sanctuary is quite large.
Correct.
There's no way that 10 people in that sanctuary adequately spaced, not random people, specifically assigned people that know exactly how not to congregate, would constitute a hazard to anybody and would not, and therefore would be a minion with you. I really don't understand, unless there's a law that's just we're not allowed to.
There is. There's a law that we're not allowed to. So the specific.
Well, there isn't at my job. I don't understand why there's one at your job.
Right.
I don't understand why there's not one at your job. I mean, there isn't one at our job, right?
Right. So,
yeah.
So
we could have
I was just on a phone call today with Mayor Garcetti, who lovingly began his remarks on this topic with, first of all, talk to Newsom, but second of all, which was adorable. But second of all, the issue is this: they rank the gathering indoors. Stick with me on this. They rank the gathering indoors of a 500 plus. I know we were talking about 10, but stick with me. They rank the gathering indoors of a 500 person in almost every current scientific study. An indoor gathering of 500 worshipers is ranked at the same risk level as gathering in a sports stadium for an event, right? And so in order to create a general principle right now when it comes to whether or not worship spaces are open, the current guidance, especially as there's so much question around aerosol communication of this virus and the concern that chanting and singing is a super spreader of this virus, the current regulation is there is no indoor worship gathering, period. Like, forget about the chanting and the singing guidelines. There simply is no indoor worship. In fact, the current state guidelines currently say their houses of worship are closed. Like, if you read on the state website right now, it says houses of worship are closed. What it says is, though, the exception is you can gather outdoors, right? So it's really interesting. It doesn't even say we're open for outdoor worship. It just says if you're able to gather outdoors, you can worship. So it's gonna be a while. Like, it's worse than what you're saying, meaning in response to you. It's actually gonna be a while even before they let us.
Right. So even in theory, even you aren't really supposed to be there.
No, I am because I'm considered an essential worker for purposes of live streaming, and I'm actually allowed to be there with a certain number of people for recording purposes. So that's why you'll see videos online of people recording in groups. Yeah. So for those purposes, I'm an essential worker. Yeah. And that's how we're allowed to be in that space. But it's gonna be a while.
That actually buttresses my argument about the dispensation for Minyan, because even if we go back in 2 months and we've wiped out this virus, it's not going to be the same for a long, long time.
Right. Not
going to be any 2 months.
The reality might be
that next year, sometime March, May, depending upon when we get the vaccinations.
Right. I think outdoor worship is. As far as I'm concerned, what I'm very proud of at Beth is that every time we've figured out something that is both safe and like desirable by our congregation, we've been willing to invest like resources, effort, creativity, everything to try to make those things work. Dan, like that's what I witnessed Jen doing as a lay leader. For those who don't know, like Jennifer is an extraordinary ritual VP in this way, like just investing a lot of hours in making it possible for us to just, okay, we're permitted to do davening in this way. Let's do davening in this way. And I think that's how it's going to have to be for a long time. Figuring out what is the permissible way that we can gather, whether that's virtual or not. And I also think that there's a secondary tier of questions, which is even once we're back there, what's the lingering reality for people who are going to be the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth tiers of people who are able to return? Because there are people who are going to be able to come back in the minute that we're able to be back there in that sanctuary, and there are people who are in a class health-wise and otherwise who will not be able to return for quite some time.
Well, and then there's people who will be able but won't want to because they still won't feel safe.
Right, and the perception of safety, correct.
It'll be a long time to
but I do have a question. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
You had posed a possibility of coming into the sanctuary during Rosh Hashanah day 1 or day 2. Was that with a clergy person present or no?
You mean coming into the Ark? like coming in to go to the. So we're about to send out an email about that. It's not on Rosh Hashanah day 1 or day 2. It's going to be over the course of the next couple weeks. It's not on those days. It's before those days. But that email is about to go out. So all the clergy, we've already assigned ourselves to those days. We're ready to go. We're just waiting for the email to go for people to sign up for their slots to come in for those who feel comfortable.
I hear the struggle that Barbara is iterating, and Joel was, and a lot of people are thinking, like, let's move the halacha forward, shall we? This is almost 6 months already. And yet I've been around minyanim who are not able to do that out of respect for the halacha. I heard just this morning an alternative for when a minyan is not present physically, that you simply say a kavanah and maybe a few words of the Chatzi Kaddish instead of doing the whole thing.
Like a Yikadal Yikadash Shemei Rabbah, and then something about that.
And then an offering to those who are remembering a loved one, and leading a kavanah with that as a kind of an alternative.
Very nice. I think we have to be extraordinarily inventive. I don't think we get to stop just because this is ongoing. None of us, and I mean really all of us. If you're here in this navigating the Mahzor class, it means you care about liturgy. It means that you care about shul in some respect. And I challenge all of us this season to think creatively about how not to let this stuff languish. That's why I'm not just saying we're not going to talk about this page this year because we're skipping it this year. I think we have to address it and to make it present for us this year. So I am open to your creative ideas. I look forward to continuing the conversation. I hope you come to class next week. And we still got a couple left.